Здравейте отново на всички. Продължаваме с темата On Being, която е малко трудна за усвоение, но ни предстоят доста интересни теми след тази. И че тази не е интересна, но е малко по-трудна за усвоение. Да, малко съм изморен, тъй че ще извинявате предварително. И така, продължаваме с 89-та страница. Добри новини също за следващата книга след тази, защото е на български и е отвъд доброто и злото на Ницше. Аз се търсих дали някъде около мен, ама не е. Мой на български, затова след като приключим тези, ще започна с нещо на български, което се надявам да е доста освежаващо за канала, но тези съм почнали с тая. Няма как вече. Така че продължаваме. We are weak, watery beings standing in the midst of unrealities. Therefore, let us turn our minds to the things that are everlasting. Let us look up to the ideal outlines of all things that flit about on high, and to the God who moves among them and plans how he may defend from death that which he could not make imperishable because its substance forbade, and so by reason may overcome the defects of the body. For all things abide not because they are everlasting, but because they are protected by the care of him who governs all things. But that which was imperishable would need no guardian. The master builder keeps them safe, overcoming the weakness of their fabric by his own power. Let us despise everything that is so little an object of value that it makes us doubt whether it exists at all. Let us at the same time reflect, seeing that Providence rescues from its perils the world itself, which is no less mortal than we ourselves. That to some extent our petty bodies can be made to tarry longer upon earth by our own providence. If only we acquire the ability to control and check those pleasures whereby the greater portion of mankind perishes. Plato himself, by taking pains, advanced to old age. To be sure, he was the fortunate possessor of a strong and sound body, in brackets. His very name was given him because of his broad chest. But his strength was much impaired by sea voyages and desperate adventures. Nevertheless, by frugal living, by setting a limit upon all that rouses the appetites, and by painstaking attention to himself, he reached that advanced age in spite of many hindrances. You know, I am sure that Plato had the good fortune, thanks to his careful living, to die on his birthday, after exactly completing his 81st year. Това е малко вече доста... Не знам коя тежест мога предиш на това, тъй като времето е някаква концепция, създадена от човека, тъй че... Но да, психически си даваш тежест на тези неща, като всяко нещо в живота. For this reason, wise men of the East who happened to be in Athens at that time sacrificed to him after his death, believing that his length of days was too full for a mortal man, since he had rounded out the perfect number of 9 times 9. I do not doubt that he would have been quite willing to forego a few days from this total, as well as the sacrifice. Frugal living can bring one to old age, and to my mind, old age is not to be refused any more than it is to be craved. There is a pleasure in being one's own company as long as possible. When a man has made himself worth enjoying, the question therefore on which we have to record our judgment is whether one should shrink from extreme old age and should hasten the end artificially instead of waiting for it to come. A man who sluggishly awaits his fate is almost a coward, just as he is immoderately given to wine who drains the jar dry and sucks up even the dregs. But we shall ask this question also. Is the extremity of life in the dregs, or is it the clearest and purest part of all, provided only that the mind is unimpaired and the senses, still sound, give their support to the spirit, and the body is not worn out and dead before its time? For it makes a great deal of difference whether a man is lengthening his life or his death. But if the body is useless for surface, why should one not free the struggling soul? Perhaps one ought to do this a little before the debt is due, lest, when it falls due, he may be unable to perform the act. And since the danger of living in wretchedness is greater than the danger of dying soon, he is a fool who refuses to stake a little time and win a hazard of great gain. Few have lasted through extreme old age to death without impairment, and many have lain inert, making no use of themselves. How much more cruel, then, do you suppose it really is to have lost a portion of your life than to have lost your right to end that life? Do not hear me with reluctance, as if my statement applied directly to you, but weigh what I have to say. It is this, that I shall not abandon old age. If old age perseveres me intact for myself, and intact as regards the better part of myself, but if old age begins to shatter my mind and to pull its various faculties to pieces, if it leaves me not life but only the breath of life, ghost in a shell type sentence, I shall rush out of a house that is crumbling and tottering. I shall not avoid illness by seeking death, as long as the illness is curable and does not impede my soul. I shall not lay violent hands upon myself just because I am in pain, for death under such circumstances is defeat. But if I find out that the pain must always be endured, I shall depart not because of the pain, but because it will be a hindrance to me as regards all my reasons for living. He who dies just because he is in pain is a weakling, a coward, but he who lives merely to brave out this pain is a fool. But I am running on too long, and besides there is matter here to fill a day, and how can a man end his life if he cannot end a letter? So farewell, this last word you will read with great pleasure than all my deadly talk about death. Farewell. Доста често съм чувал хора, нали, които поради една или друга причина избират, нали, някак си да си прекратят живота, просто защото първо, че голяма част за мъжете не искат техните близки да ги помнят по този начин. Може би чисто заради репутацията, която човек се гради, като какъв човек ставаш, когато си баща и дядо и протектор. И в един момент, когато видиш човека толкова уязвим, предполагам, че егото на мъжа доста се чупи, въпреки че от мои изживявания бих казал, че че го видях това нещо от първо лице и не бих казал, че лично за мен това е било нещо лошо да видя някой мой близък човек в такова състояние. Дори бих казал, че е доста хуманизиращо, защото по този начин малко или много можеш да видиш и другата част на човека, който е бил като защита за тебе. И виждаш го и в друга светлина и си кажеш, да, същия човек, който е такъв, може и да е такъв. Както малко с дебата, дали това, което правиш е това, което си. Малко ми се струва, че темите са доста допирни и крайният консенсус ми се струва, че е доста еднакъв накрая. В случая, нали, просто иска да кажа, ми се струва, че нали, хем, ако си в много голяма болка, ако си прекратиш живота е, нали, някакъв вид страхливост, но пък, нали, ако живееш напук на болката е да си глупав. И се струва, че всеки трябва да се го отговори този въпрос за себе си, спрямо атмосферата и хората около него и това, нали, дали това, че е жив по какъв начин, нали, има някаква тежест върху семейството и околните. Не случайно има хора, които може би чисто духовно са, как да кажа, има хора, нали, след като се случи нещо специфично, чак тогава умират, защото, нали, може би някак са чакали да минат тези неща, за да може да се отпуснат, нали, да... Както и да е. Така. On the first cause, 92 страница. Нямам търпение да стигнем след тази тема. Не on taking one's life. Ми беше... Къде беше? Тук близките теми, едната, много ми харесва. Въпреки че те се препокриват малко между другото. Тия последните 3 страници от, мисля, че е на Healthy Mind, нещо от сорта беше. Нещо за Healthy Mind беше тая темичка. Сега ще погледна. Не знам къде е. Но се препокриват. Те доста от темите се препокриват някои неща, но както и да е. On the first cause. I shared my time yesterday with ill health. It claimed for itself all the period before noon. In the afternoon, however, it yielded to me. And so I first tested my spirit by reading. Then, when reading was found to be possible, I dared to make more demands upon the spirit, or perhaps I should say to make more concessions to it. I wrote a little, and indeed with more concentration than usual, for I am struggling with a difficult subject and do not wish to be downed. In the midst of this, some friends visited me, with the purpose of employing force and of restraining me, as if I were a sick man indulging in some excess, so conversation was substituted for writing. And from this conversation I shall communicate to you the topic which is still the subject of debate, for we have appointed your referee. You have more of a task on your hands than you suppose, for the argument is threefold. Get ready, my dear listeners. Our Stoic philosophers, as you know, declare that there are two things in the universe which are the source of everything, namely, cause and matter. Matter lies sluggish, a substance ready for any use, but sure to remain unemployed if one sets it in motion. Because, however, by which we mean reason, molds matter and turns it in whatever direction it will, producing thereby various concrete results. Accordingly, there must be in the case of each thing that from which it is made, and next an agent by which it is made. The former is its material, the latter its cause. All art is but imitation of nature. Therefore let me apply... All art is but imitation of nature. Imitation. Интересно, защото, нали, съм си мислил, примерно, дали технологията и всичко, което на заобикаля, тъй като е направено от човека, дали е natural occurrence. Защото ако не е natural occurrence, тогава много се променят нещата. Това означава, че има някакво third party, което, нали, движи нещата. Тоест, ако if all art is imitation of nature, това означава, че човека е друг being, който не е part of nature, защото нещата, които прави са natural. Защото идват от човека, а не от нещо, което не е някакъв екстратерестриал, което пак е част от природата. Зависи колко, според мен, колко излизаш от картината да видиш цялата всъщност ми се струва, не знам. Може да греша, сега ще прочетем пак. Аз тотално съм забравил тая тема. Има някой... Видях точно това, което исках да ви кажа току-що. Да, казва се On the healing power of the mind. All art is but imitation of nature. Therefore, let me apply these statements of general principles to the things which have to be made by man. A statue, for example, has afforded matter which was to undergo treatment at the hands of an artist, and has had an artist who was to give form to the matter. Hence, in the case of the statue, the material was bronze, the cause was the workman. And so it goes with all things. They consist of that which is made and of the maker. The Stoics believe in one cause only, the maker. Fair enough. But Aristotle thinks that the word cause can be used in three ways. The first cause, in brackets, he says, is the actual matter without which nothing can be created. The second is the workman. The third is the form which is impressed upon every work. A statue, for example. This last is what Aristotle calls the idols. There is too, says he, a fourth, the purpose of the work as a whole. As a whole. Тоест, нали, the cause, мотива, и the purpose of the cause of the work as a whole. Нали, мотива по-скоро може би и мотива и пърпаса на work as a whole може би са, как да кажа, от един и същ корен, просто един е малко по-израснал, се вижда повече, докато този втория е малко по-надолу. Едва ли не е root cause. Now I shall show you what this last means. Bronze is the first Bronze is the first cause of the statue, for it could never have been made unless there had been something from which it could be cast and molded. The second cause is the artist, for without the skilled hands of a workman then that bronze could not have been shaped out the outlines of the statue. The third cause is the form, inasmuch as our statue could never be called the lance bearer, or the boy binding his hair had not this special shape been stamped upon it. The fourth cause is the purpose of the work, for if this purpose had not existed, the statue would not have been made. Now what is this purpose? It is that which attracted the artist which he followed when he made the statue. It may have been money, if he has made it for sale, or renown, if he has worked for reputation, or religion, if he has wrought it as a gift for a temple. Therefore this also is a cause contributing towards the making of the statue. Or do you think that we should avoid including among the causes of a thing which has been made that element without which the thing in question would not have been made? To these four, Plato adds a fifth cause, the pattern which he himself calls the idea, for it is this that the artist gazed upon when he created the work, which he had decided to carry out. Now it makes no difference whether he has this pattern outside himself, that he may direct his glance to it, or within himself, conceived and placed there by himself. God has within himself these patterns of all things, and his mind comprehends the harmonies and the measures of the whole totality of things which are to be carried out. He is filled with these shapes which Plato calls the ideas, imperishable, unchangeable, not subject to decay. And therefore, though men die, humanity itself, or the idea of man according to which is molded, lasts on, and though men toil and perish, it suffers no change. Accordingly, there are five causes, as Plato says: the material, the agent, the makeup, the moral, and the end in view. Last comes the result of all these. Just as in the case of the statue, to go back to the figure with which we began, the material is the bronze, the agent is the artist, the makeup is the form which is adapted to the material, the model is the pattern imitated by the agent, the end in view is the purpose in the maker's mind, and finally, the result of all these is the statue itself. The universe also, in Plato's opinion, possesses all these elements. The agent is God, the source, matter, the form, the shape, and the arrangement of the visible world. The pattern is doubtless the model according to which God has made this great and most beautiful creation. The purpose is his object in so doing. Do you ask what God's purpose is? It is goodness. Plato, at any rate, says, what was God's reason for creating the world? God is good, and no good person is grudging of anything that is good. Therefore, God made it the best world possible. Hand down your opinion then, O judge. State who seems to you to say what is truest, and not who says what is absolutely true. For to do is as far beyond our ken as truth itself, embraces either too much or too little. For if they regard as causes of an object that is to be made everything without which the object cannot be made, they have named too few. Time must be included among the causes, for nothing can be made without time. They must also include place, for if there be no place where a thing can be made, it will not be made, and motion too. Nothing is either made or destroyed without motion. There is no art without motion, no change of any kind. Now, however, I am searching for the general cause. This must be simple inasmuch as the matter too is simple. Do we ask what cause is? It is surely creative reason, in other words, God. For those elements to which you referred are not a great series of independent causes. They all hinge on one alone, and that will be the creative cause. Do you maintain that form is a cause? This is only what the artist stamps upon his work. It is part of a cause, but not the cause. Neither is the pattern a cause, but an indispensable tool of the cause. His pattern is as indispensable to the artist as the chisel or the file. Without these, art can make no progress. But for all that, these things are neither parts of the art nor causes of it. Then, perhaps you will say, the purpose of the artist, that which leads him to undertake to create something, is the cause. It may be a cause, it is not, however, the efficient cause, but only an accessory cause. But there are countless accessory causes. What are we discussing is the general cause. Now the statement of Plato and Aristotle is not in accord with their usual penetration, when they maintain that the whole universe, the perfectly wrought work, is a cause, for there is a great difference between a work and the cause of work. Either give your opinion, or, as is easier in cases of this kind, declare that the matter is not clear and call for another hearing. But you will reply, what pleasure do you get from wasting your time on these problems, which relieve you of none of your emotions, rout none of your desires? So far as I am concerned, I treat and discuss them as matters which contribute greatly toward calming the spirit, and I search myself first, and then the world about me. And not even now am I, as you think, wasting my time. For all these questions, provided that they be not chopped up and torn apart into such unprofitable refinements, elevate and lighten the soul, which is weighed upon by a heavy burden and desires to be freed and to return to the elements of which it was once a part. Мане, на моменти направо, като говоря, имам чувство, че мога да помириша някакви цветя, честно казано. Защото доста често споменава в този вид, нали, че едва ли не му дава кой знае какъв бенефит това, че прави такава сериозна дисекция на неща. И наистина бих казал, че е доста успокояващо, когато се опиташ, просто когато се опиташ да разбереш. И I'm concerned I treat and discuss them as matters which contribute greatly toward calming the spirit. And I search myself first and then the world about me, and not even now am I, as you think, wasting my time. Точно заради това, губенето на време за мен винаги е било едно отвратително изказване, защото почти всяко нещо, което човек прави, намира нещо позитивно в него, за да го продължава да го прави. И каквото да се случи като противодействие от това нещо е някакъв урок. Тоест, ако примерно може да го сложим от две доста големи крайности. Едната крайност е на първо време доста безобидно звучаща. Примерно да кажем да лежиш вкъщи да гледаш филми. Някои хора казват това, че е губен на време. Другият ти вариант е да си наркоман и да се друсаш по улиците, което за хората ще кажат, нали, това е по-голямо губене на време. И то не е само губене на време, самоунищожение. Но тези реакции, тези активи, нали, които присъстват навсякъде, те са някаква реакция от нещо. И, нали, разбира се, има хора, които така се остават цял живот. Има хора, които цял живот гледат филми, за да се различават. Има и хора, които цял живот не само да се различават, ами да се поставят в друг живот, дори за малко. Което бих казал, че, нали, не винаги мога да кажеш кое е по-лошото и кое е по-увличащо и кое е изгниващо душата е всъщност. Има хора, които колкото по-надълбоко отиват, толкова по-бързо се връщат. Нали, като едно дете, което излезе, нали, и почва да се пари, обаче някои деца са малко по-натливи и не се връщат веднага към родителите си, нали, хертейкъра им да кажат, да отидат да оглушнат, нали, да се върнат като някакъв safe space. Има някои, които са малко имат повече кураж, смелост и затова и голяма част от тях се парят доста повече от това жигосване, което идва от тях, нали, това желание за жигосване накрая, нали, се случва така, че се лекуват от него доста време. И също така има и други хора, нали, които предпочитат, нали, да се гледат филми, които няма нищо лошо. Въпросът е какво се случва след това. Нали, до каква степен човек се дави в чужди сценарии, концепции, по какъв начин, нали, ги романтизира в ежедневието си. Но много ми хареса това последното изречение. For all these questions, provided that they be not chopped up and torn apart into such unprofitable refinements, elevate and lighten the soul which is weighted down by a heavy burden and desires to be freed and to return to the element of which it was once a part. Направо ти фаща някакви звездички, не те и ти ги слага в едно изречение и ти казва, ай, брат, заповядай малко да ти е готино тук за 10 секунди, докато си мислиш, че го разбираш. For this body of ours is a weight upon the soul in its penance, as the load presses down the soul is crushed in a bondage, unless philosophy has come to its assistance and has bid it to take a fresh courage by contemplating the universe, and has turned it from things earthly to things divine. There it has its liberty. There it can roam abroad. Meantime it escapes the custody in which it is bound, and renews its life in heaven, just as skilled workmen who have been engaged upon some delicate piece of work which wearies their eyes with straining, if the light which they have is niggardly or uncertain, go forth into the open air and in some park devoted to the people's recreation delight their eyes in the generous light of day. So the soul, imprisoned as it has been in this gloomy and darkened house, seeks the open sky whenever it can, and in the contemplation of the universe finds rest. The wise man, the seeker after wisdom, is bound closely indeed to his body, but he is an absentee so far as his better self is concerned, and he concentrates his thought upon lofty things. Bound, so to speak, to his oath of allegiance, he regards the period of life as his term of service. He is so trained that he neither loves nor hates life. He endures a mortal lot, although he knows that an ampler lot is in store for him. Do you forbid me to contemplate the universe? Do you compel me to withdraw from the whole and restrict me to a part? May I not ask what are the beginnings of all things who mold the universe? Who took the confused and съжалявам, някой път има хора, отворен съм прозореца. Who took the confused and conglomerate mass of sluggish matter and separated it in its parts. Мисля, че това имаше едно изказване, не знам дали беше на Ницше това. Нали, беше нещо от сорта, нали, ако видиш човек, който влиза в бездната, единственото нещо, което мога да направиш е да гледаш, да се възхищаваш. Защото тези, нали, хем, колкото можеш да намериш рест, може да намериш и unrest. Затова е моменти, в които трябва малко да излезеш от този абис, така да го кажем. May I not inquire who is the master builder of this universe, how the mighty bulk was brought under the control of law and order, who gathered together the scattered atoms, who separated the disordered elements and assigned an outward form to elements that lay in one vast shapelessness? Or whence came all the expanse of light, and whether is it fire or even brighter than fire? Am I not to ask these questions? Must I be ignorant of the heights whence I have descended? Whether I am to see the world but once or to be born many times? What is my destination afterwards? What abode awaits my soul on its release from the laws of slavery among men? Do you forbid me to have a share in heaven? In other words, do you bid me live with my head bowed down? Now I am above such an existence. I was born to a greater destiny than to be a mere chattel of my body, and I regard this body as nothing but a chain which manacles my freedom. Therefore I offered it as a sort of buffer to fortune, and shall allow no wound to penetrate through my soul. For my body is the only part of me which can suffer injury. In this dwelling which is exposed to peril, my soul lives free. Never shall this flesh drive me to feel fear or to assume any pretense that is unworthy of a good man. Never shall I lie in order to honor this pretty body. When it seems proper, I shall sever my connection with it. And at present, while we are bound together, our alliance shall nevertheless not be one of equality. The soul shall bring all quarrels before its own tribunal. To despise our bodies is sure freedom. Не бих казал. Разбирам какво иска да кажа, нали, в случая, но просто малко крайно или просто е lost in translation това изречение. Но бих казал, че също тялото е много хубаво средство, през което можеш да изпиташ живота. Нали? Сега той нямаше да осъзнава какво се изразява, ако нямаш тяло, с което да ги сравни тези неща. Което пак е част от природата. To return to our subject, this freedom will be greatly helped by the contemplation of which we were just speaking. All things are made up of matter and of God. God controls matter, which encompasses him and follows him as its guide and leader. And that which creates, in other words, God is a more powerful and precious than matter, which is acted upon by God. God's place in this universe corresponds to the soul's relation to a man. Пак ще го кажа. God's place in the universe corresponds to the soul's relation to man. World matter corresponds to our mortal body. Therefore, let the lower serve the higher. Let us be brave in the face of hazards. Let us not fear wrongs or wounds or bonds or poverty. Изключително бързо заваля току-що за точно 2 секунди 3 и вече стабилно се брендащ. Let us be brave in the face of hazards. Let us not fear wrongs or wounds or bonds or poverty. And what is death? It is either the end or a process of change. I have no fear of ceasing to exist. It is the same as not having begun. Nor do I shrink from changing into another state, because I shall under no conditions be as cramped as I am now. Farewell. Малко спорни мнения на моменти със сигурност, но пък е много красивен. 92-та страница On Taking One's Own Life, което беше малко по-рано пак, ето както споменах. Време на време мисля, някои неща явно може би искат да ги изанализира или да изкаже. Така. Нямам колко стана. 31. Ще издържите още 20 минути. Suddenly there came into our view today the Alexandrian ships. I mean those which are usually sent ahead to announce the coming of the fleet. They are called mail boats. The companions are glad to see them. All the rabble of Puteoli stand on the docks and can recognize the Alexandrian boats, no matter how great the crowd of vessels by the very trim of their sails, for they alone may keep spread their top sails which all ships use when out at the sea, because nothing sends a ship along so well as its upper canvas. That is where most of the speed is obtained. So when the breeze has stiffened and becomes stronger and then is comfortable, they set their yards lower, for the wind has less force near the surface of the water. Accordingly, when they have made... това много интересно. Ми се струва, може би, защото колкото повече четеш така литература, толкова повече почва да се формираш и да слагаш всяко нещо на любов, някаква такава някакво метафорично значение. Едва ли нещо, когато вълните на живота станат твърде силни, просто се опитваш да не файтваш толкова много баками, нали, да се отпуснеш. Защото просто няма какво да направиш. Tall Palace watches on the stormy peak. All other vessels are bidden to be content with the mainsail, and the topsail stands out conspicuously on the Alexandrian mailboats. While everybody was bustling about and hurrying to the waterfront, I felt great pleasure in my laziness. Real. Because although I was soon to receive letters from my friends, I was in no hurry to know how my affairs were progressing abroad, or what news the letters were bringing. For some time now I have had no losses, nor gains either. Even if I were not an old man, I could not have helped feeling pleasure at this, but as is, my pleasure was far greater. For however small my possessions might be, I should still have left over more traveling money than journey to travel. Especially since this journey upon which we have set out is one which needs to be followed to the end. An expedition will be incomplete if one stops halfway or anywhere on the side of one's destination, but life is not incomplete if it is honorable. At whatever point you leave off living, provided you leave off nobly, your life is a whole. Often, however, one must leave off bravely, and our reasons therefore need not be momentous, for neither are the reasons momentous which hold us here. Tullius Marcellinus, a man who you knew very well, who in youth was a quiet soul and became old prematurely, fell ill of a disease which was by no means hopeless, but it was protracted and troublesome, and it demanded much attention. Hence he began to think about dying. He called many of his friends together. Each one of them gave Marcellinus advice, the timid friend urging him to do what he had made up his mind to do. the flattering and wheedling friend giving counsel which he supposed would be more pleasing to Marcellinus. When he came to think the matter over, but our Stoic friend, a rare man, and to praise him in language which he deserves, a man of courage and vigor, admonished him, best of all, as it seems to me. For he began as follows: Do not torment yourself, my dear Marcellinus, as if the question which you are weighing were a matter of importance. It is not an important matter to live. All your slaves live, and so do all animals, but it is important to die honorably, sensibly, bravely. Reflect how long you have been doing the same things: food, sleep, lust. This once daily around. The desire to die may be felt not only by the sensible man or the brave or unhappy man, but even by the man who merely surfeited. Marcellinus did not need someone to urge him, but rather someone to help him. His slaves refused to do his bidding. The Stoic therefore removed their fears, showing them that there was no risk involved for the household except when it was uncertain whether the master's death was self-sought or not. Besides, it was as a bad practice to kill one's master as it was to prevent him forcibly from killing himself. Then he suggested to Marcellinus himself that it would be a kindly act to distribute gifts to those who had attended him throughout his whole life. When that life has finished, just as, when a banquet is finished, the remaining portion is divided among the attendants who stand about the table. Marcellinus was of a compliant and generous disposition, even when it was a question of his own property. So he distributed little sums among his sorrowing slaves, and comforted them besides. No need had he of sword or of bloodshed. For 3 days he fasted and had a tent up in his very bedroom. Then a tub was brought in. He lay in it for a long time, and as the hot water was continually poured over him, he gradually passed away. Not without a feeling of pleasure, as he himself remarked, such a feeling as a slow dissolution is wont to give. Those of us who have ever fainted know from experience what the feeling is. This little anecdote into which I have digressed will not be displeasing to you, for you will see that your friend departed neither with difficulty nor with suffering. Though he committed suicide, yet he withdrew most gently, gliding out of life. The anecdote may also be of some use, for often a crisis demands such examples. There are times when we ought to die and are unwilling. Sometimes we die and are unwilling. No one is so ignorant as not to know that we must at some time die. Nevertheless, when one draws near death, one turns to flight, trembles, and laments. Would you not think him an utter fool who wept because he was not alive 1,000 years ago? And is he not just as much of a fool who weeps because he will not be alive 1,000 years from now? It is all the same. You will not be, and you are not. Neither of these periods of time belongs to you. You have been cast upon this point of time. If you would make it longer, how much longer shall you make it? Why weep? Why pray? You are taking pains to no purpose. Give over thinking that your prayers can bend divine decrees from their predestined end. Обаче, ако всичко е предестин, защо се молиш тогава? Нали, като по-скоро свързвам с християнството в момента, нали, че ако всичко е пренаписано, има план за тебе, защо се молиш? За какво се молиш? Значи, идеята в случая явно не е да се молиш, а по-скоро да се отпуснеш. И това пак много зависи, изключително според мен на спорна тема е това. Give over thinking that your prayers can bend divine decrees from their predestined end. Едва ли си мислиш, че с твоите молитви можеш да направиш нещо толкова supernatural, като да промениш съдбата. Ама това означава, че той е конвинсен, че съдбата съществува и че всичко е предестинт. Което може би просто на мен не ми харесва, че го вярва и че е някакъв concrete belief. These decrees are unalterable and fixed. They are governed by a mighty and everlasting compulsion. Your goal will be the goal of all things. What is there strange in this to you? You are born to be subject to this law. This fate befell your father, your mother, your ancestors, all who came before you, and it will befall all who shall came after you. A sequence which cannot be broken or altered by any power binds all things together and draws all things in its course. Think of the multitudes of men doomed to death who will come after you, of the multitudes who will go with you. You will die more bravely, I suppose, in the company of many thousands, and yet there are many thousands, both of men and of animals, who at this very moment, while you're irresolute about death, are breathing their last in their several ways. But did you believe that you would not someday reach the goal towards which you have always been traveling? No journey but has its end. You think, I suppose, that it is now in order for me to cite some examples of great men. No, I shall cite rather the case of a boy. The story of the Spartan lad has been preserved. Taken captive while still a stripling, he kept crying in his Doric dialect, I will not be a slave, and he made good his word. For the very first time he was ordered to perform a menial and degrading service, and the command was to fetch a chamber pot. He dashed out his brains against the wall. So near at hand is freedom, and is anyone still a slave? Would you not rather have your own son die thus than reach old age by weakly yielding? Why therefore are you distressed, when even a boy can die so bravely? Suppose... What the fuck, brother? Suppose that you refuse to follow him. You will be led. Take into your own control that which is now under the control of another. Will you not borrow that boy's courage and say, I am no slave? Unhappy fellow, you are a slave to man. You are a slave to your business, you are a slave to life. For life, if courage to die be lacking, is slavery. Real. Have you anything worth waiting for? Your very pleasing, your very pleasures, which cause you to tarry and hold you back, have already been exhausted by you. None of them is a novelty to you, and there is none that has not already become hateful because you are cloyed with it. You know the taste of wine and cordials. It makes no difference whether 100 or 1,000 measures pass through your bladder. You are nothing but a wine strainer. You are a connoisseur in the flavor of the oyster and of the mullet. Your luxury has not left you anything untasted for the years that are to come, and yet these are the things from which you are torn away unwillingly. What else is there which you would regret to have taken from you? Friends? Who can be a friend to you? Country? What? Do you think enough of your country to be late to dinner? The light of the sun? You would extinguish it if you could. For have you ever done what was fit to be seen in the light? Confess the truth. It is not because you long for the Senate chamber or the forum, or even for the world of nature, that you would fain put off dying. It is because you are loath to leave the fish market, though you have exhausted its stores. О, защо трябва да влиза така този пич, бе, брат? You are afraid of death, but how can you scorn it in the midst of a mushroom supper? You wish to live well. Do you know how to live? You are afraid to die. But come now, is this life of yours anything but death? Gaius Caesar was passing along the Via Latina, when a man stepped out from the ranks of the prisoners, his grey beard hanging down even to his breast, and begged to be put to death. What? Said Caesar. Are you alive now? This is the answer which should be given to men to whom death would come as a relief. You are afraid to die. What? Are you alive now? But, says one, I wish to live, for I am engaged in many honorable pursuits. I am loth to leave life's duties, which I am fulfilling with loyalty and zeal. Surely you are aware that dying is also one of life's duties. You are deserting no duty, for there is no definite number established which you are bound to complete. There is no life that is not short. Compared with the world of nature, even Nestor's life was a short one, or Satya's, the woman who bade carve on her tombstone that she had lived 99 years. Some persons, you see, boast of their long lives, but who could have endured the old lady if she had had the luck to complete her 100th year? It is with life as it is with a play. It matters not how long the action is spun out, but how good the acting is. It makes no difference at what point you stop. Stop whenever you choose. Only see to it that the closing period is well turned. Crazy. Literally crazy. Наистина. И с това последно томче приключваме. Вече сме на 104-та страница. Предстоят доста интересни теми. Отново. Тези всъщност бяха супер яки, честно казано. Вече сме на половината на книжката, понеже съм доста развълнуван да продължавам да чета с българска книга. Най-вероятно малко ще позаселя темпото последните няколко страници, зависи вече колко има за анализиране, за да може да започваме вече и с други темички, малко да разширим хоризонтите в каналчето. И така, приятели, здраве и желание за живот на всички. До другия път.